Welcome into Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Finally, I am Joe Hamilton alongside Theo. First of all, before I ask Theo how he's doing, sorry about the technical difficulties there. Having some computer issues at the moment, so hang with me. So Theo, how you doing, man?
Doing all right, man. It's Tuesday. It was a pretty chill day, nothing going crazy, but I tell you, there's a lot of hot seats out there, a lot of opinions being watched and discussed, including our own tonight. So we'll see how we shape up compared to those other wonderful people we follow and discuss all day leading up to tonight.
Yeah, that's for sure. If you guys were wanting to watch the Cardinal game tonight, well, that was postponed. And for what reason, I don't know, because as soon as they postponed it, it cleared up and got nice. But there's a split doubleheader tomorrow, which, by the way, if you have tickets for tonight's game, and if you got them through the Cardinals, you will be able to redeem the vouchers for a future game this season. If you have tickets for tomorrow, you get to see both games of that doubleheader. So
it's a long day at the ballpark. You can get pretty sloppy if you stick 14 innings of baseball. That's all I got to say.
Well, here's the thing, though, on that. It's seven innings, so it's not like the games are that long, number one. Number two, I think they did this because of social distancing and everything else and trying to adhere to regulations and whatnot. But still, it's going to be a fun day at the ballpark tomorrow. That will be for sure. Before we talk about, things going on in baseball tonight, the first thing I wanted to talk about is how the New York Mets handled the firing of their hitting coaches. So basically,
they handled it like this. And then the power of social media, they handled it like this.
So basically, after the game last night, the Mets fired their hitting coach and assistant hitting coach. And the players had no idea about this until they found out on Twitter, and one of those players being Pete Alonso. If you're wanting to keep a guy for a long time, this is not the way to do things. You need to let your guys know up front you're firing someone. They just dropped the ball, but then again, it's the New York Mets. Can we expect anything else?
Well, here's another twist on the whole story. If you follow, I don't know if I read the New York Post reading on this that was done earlier this morning. Apparently, they were trying to have some fun with this whole hitting coach ordeal because the New York Mets aren't hitting the ball at all. They're 29th out of 30 teams in batting average, runs scored, and every other single offensive number you could think of, just above the Detroit Tigers. But it turns out that the Mets organization was making fun or puns of hitting coaches or personnel that were made believe. Like they weren't even real people. Saying that there was this so-called other development coach or this development hitting guy saying, oh, they joined the team and they helped us in this way and they helped us with that way. They cleared the chakras as far as I'm concerned. But like you said, on social media, these players are finding out that Chili, Davis, and Slater are both kicked into the curb because they're being left to blame because their hitters can't hit the ball. And when you've got players like Alonso, as well as a pretty prominent signing in the offseason in Mr. Lindor, who's worth a huge chunk of change now till 2031, batting a 163 right now and only one ball that's left the 400-foot mark. You're blaming Chili Davis for his antics and being 11-12 on the season? I mean, it's not the first time Chili Davis has been blamed for terrible hitting. I mean, he got fired from the Cubs a couple of years ago or several years ago. And then he got picked up by the Mets and has been with the Mets for, I think, 4 years, I believe, if my memory serves me right. So it's not like this has been a recent issue, but it has been, so to speak, because the Mets didn't hit the ball too bad in recent years.
Yeah, the Mets have not hit the ball that bad in recent years. They've had trouble scoring, and especially for Jacob deGrom, but that's another story for another day. Besides, Jacob deGrom was
he was scratched today. He wasn't pitching today.
He was scratched today because of side tightness, and he had an MRI that revealed some inflammation in his lat. So he will continue to throw in the next couple of days. won't pick up a baseball until then. I think the Cardinals dodged a huge bullet there because Jacob deGrom was 2-2 with a .51 ERA. You know, some people would say that maybe Jacob deGrom was due for a loss. Would you kind of?
Well, Jacob deGrom's record is sub 500 when they bat less than 200 on the night. So they're right in that wheelhouse. Secondly, the run support that the Mets have had this year has been terrible, averaging less than 3.2 runs a game, 7.1 hits per average, and that's below the average of the NL. That's the National League average right now. Hitting is at an all-time low across the entire board this year. Whether you want to blame a 60-game season from last year, whether you want to give kudos to the pitching staffs that are all over Major League Baseball, because clearly we have seen, not only just in regular season ball, but if you were to look at all-star games, there is 0 to 0 chance of baseball hitters doing better than pitchers. I mean, pitchers have owned the all-star game in the last decade. Mark me if I'm wrong on that, Joe. But when you're looking at baseball games, especially all-star games, pitchers are owning batters. And it shows evident. I think since 1968, this is the lowest runs per game that they've seen in the last, 50, 60 years now? 1968. Do the math.
Batting average as a league is the lowest since the 60s, and that's bad. That's just a bad look for the league. And they're trying different ideas, maybe pushing the mound back a foot or doing different things in the minor leagues to see if they can get more offense going. But don't mess with the game. Hitters just need to adjust. And I don't feel like we're seeing that from a lot of these hitters nowadays. It's all about the launch angle. It's all about the exit velocity. It's never about putting the ball in play and seeing what happens anymore. What are the true outcomes, Theo? Home runs,
strikeout, butts in the stands, home and runs, people making money.
Home runs, strikeouts, walks. That's the three true outcomes.
It's home runs, it's butts in the stands, and owners making money. Those are the three outcomes. Let's be honest, off and on the field.
Right.
Those three things aren't happening, then baseball's not going to survive.
I'm talking in terms of the offense. Home runs, strikeouts, and walks. Those are the three true outcomes, and that's what baseball's come to. I'm not a fan of that at all. But Another thing that happened today, especially from my Cardinals, Jordan Hicks is now on the injured list, 10-day injured list with elbow inflammation. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery. He didn't pitch at all last season. You'd think maybe, give him another year to reevaluate himself and do what he has to do going forward. Well, now he's out for at least 4 weeks, at least, with that elbow inflammation. They say surgery's not on the table yet, as of yet. But, a guy throwing 100 miles an hour, consistently, that's not going to vote well for a long career, is it? I hate to sound that way because I love Jordan Hicks.
No, as much as he throws the ball as hard as he does, the bottom line is he's not productive unless he's on the mound. Simply put, here's a guy that's got elbow inflammation, had Tommy John once already. I don't want him to have it again, and nobody wants him to have it a second time around. But that's just one of those circumstances you have to take a chance on, because if you choose to have surgery, chances are your arm is not going to do as well as it is without surgery. And those are just some of the implications of what happens.
Yeah, it's just so bad to have a situation like this, because you want a guy to come back and have sustainability, but a guy who throws that hard is going to be tough. That is for sure. So the Cardinals again have a doubleheader tomorrow starting at 4:15. If you have tickets to tomorrow night's game, they will be good for both games tomorrow, which I am psyched.
5:15.
4:15.
They showed it, Joe.
4:15 game time. So in other news, the New York Yankees and Houston Astros play a huge series. First visit from Houston to the Bronx since Houston beat the Bronx Bombers in the 2019 LCS. And believe it or not, there were a lot of hecklers. And I'm saying that sarcastically because a lot of people saw that coming. And New York fans, they were waiting for this for a long time. I'm not going to reiterate any of the chants that were said because this is a family show. I don't want to up the rated R here. I'm not doing that. So they booed Altuve the most. My question to you is, why isn't every Astro player getting booed? It wasn't just Altuve, right?
No, but he's the loudest mouth of them all. He was the one that was pretty, him and was Correa there 2 years ago? I don't know, because some of the guys that aren't there anymore move on to other clubs. Altuve's like the number one bad guy. I mean, he's the guy that, stirred the pot the thickest, so to speak. The bottom line is, if I was a Bronx Bomber, get this out of the way. Get this first game out of the way. Get your emotions out of the way. And then come and play baseball, because the chances are, I mean, if you look at how the Yankees are playing right now, they've won 11 of 13. Don't railroad yourself into playing bad ball, because you can't forget what happened 2 years ago. Sure, you can try, but, I mean, the bottom line is you got a job to do, and your job is in the present, not in the past. And if the Yankees are going to play professional ball, they're going to do exactly that. They'll get it all of the way, first round of bats, and then start playing ball, which I think they did tonight.
Yeah, and they did. You could hear Yankee fans, of course. You saw all the creative signs. I don't know if you saw any of those, but there was one of Jose Altuve with a chat bubble saying "I'm trash," with him in a trash can. I mean, Yankee fans are the most creative when it comes to this, right?
Yeah, I saw a couple that were talking about Houston. I stole my tickets from a Houston Astros fan, or someone stole my sign to get here. My sign is over in someone else's section. All cute things like that, which I thought were pretty funny.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Before we go to break here, let's go to our MLB scoreboard. The Chicago Cubs beat the Los Angeles Dodgers in Game 1 of their doubleheader, 7-1. San Francisco took down the Colorado Rockies in Game 1 of their doubleheader, 12-4. You have the Miami Marlins beating the Arizona Diamondbacks 9-3. The Atlanta Braves taking down the Washington Nationals 6-1. Games going on right now. You have the Chicago White Sox beating the Cincinnati Reds 8-0. That game is in the top of the seventh. It's a 7-3 game in the Bronx. Yankees leading that one over the Astros. The Philadelphia Phillies are leading the Milwaukee Brewers 6-5. That game's in the eighth inning. The Boston Red Sox are leading the Detroit Tigers. That game's at the end of the seventh, 10-7. In the bottom of the eighth in Minnesota, the Minnesota Twins are beating the Texas Rangers 3-1. Top seven in the north side of Chicago for Game 2 of that doubleheader. You have the Cubs leading the Los Angeles Dodgers 1-0. In the top of the sixth at the K, you have the Kansas City Royals beating the Cleveland Indians 3-0. Top four in Colorado for Game 2 of that doubleheader. You have the San Francisco Giants winning that game 2-0. Tampa Bay and the Angels. Tampa is winning that one 1-0. That game is in the middle of the second. You have the Toronto Blue Jays and Oakland Athletics. Oakland wins this one 4-0. The Baltimore Orioles and Seattle Mariners are scoreless, and so are the Pittsburgh Pirates and San Diego Padres. Coming up next here on Crunch Time, we will be talking about the NHL. So come back right after this here on Crunch Time.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Hamilton alongside Theo. And Theo, before we get to any of the games tonight, we got to talk about the elephant in the room here. And that is Tom Wilson, who still isn't paying the price for what he's done. Being fined $5,000 for the hit on Artemi Panarin, plus roughing up Pavel Vucinovic too. There's no justice, is there?
I don't know if justice is the right word. I don't know if there's certainly no revenge or avenge in this storyline. I think this is a very big black eye for National Hockey League players in terms of safety, in terms of production, on-ice production, in terms of necessary suspensions. I really feel that you have an individual who is a talented hockey player, who plays a very physical style of hockey, who allows himself to get into the yellow zone or the red zone of emotions, and he inflicts pain in a way that should not be inflicted upon players. And when I see someone, I'm going to use the word goon, in Tom Wilson, and I see him on the ice, and I see him ragdoll the leading scorer of a team, and I see a team trying to fight back, yet they can't because they do not have that person on a Rangers roster to do such a thing. And then I see what he does to Pavel Vucinovic in front of the net. I am very dishonored to consider myself a hockey player, knowing that these still things happen. I could understand if it was a first-time offense. No, I couldn't. I'm not even going to go down that. The bottom line is you look at someone who is a repeat offender and continues to do such things, and they realize that all they get is a slap on the wrist that just tells them they can get away with it and do it again. Tom Wilson, this would have been his sixth suspension. Sixth. And when you have players in past history being suspended for dozens of games, suspended indefinitely for comments made outside of the game that may affect someone emotionally, here you have a player that is affecting two players and an entire roster physically, to the point that Artemi Panarin is now put on the bench for the remainder of this season, also because the Rangers are no longer in a playoff contention, but because they're looking after the safety of their superstar. Tom Wilson got away with an extremely lenient decision here by fellow goon, Princeton grad, well-educated person, and fellow Anaheim Duck alum, Mr. George Peros, who clearly is missing the ball. And their entire direction of player safety this entire season has really been a detriment to the game. You looked at getting rid of enforcers of the late 80s, early 90s. You've now cleaned up the game where it's safer, it's faster for the most part. But here we have an introduction of player safety, and we have zero done except for a small monetary steak dinner for the team. That's basically what it cost Tom Wilson for what he did. And then his goon antics in the penalty box, trying to flex with his shoulder pads on, taking his jersey and then leaving the ice, uncalled for. I'm going to stop there, Joe, because I want to get your feedback on this, simply because, I've been in the game where I've seen three different generations of style of hockey in the NHL. And to have this person as a good goon hockey player in the game still, as a potential role model to young players, I'm a little bit speechless. And I'll stop right there.
I'm a little speechless as well. I mean, you can't have hits like this happen in the NHL and not punish them to the full extent. Because I go back to a hit early in the season. We showed it on this show. You were on the show when I talked about this. The Mark Stone hit on, I forget which Blues player it was. It was, thank you, Tyler Bozak. The Mark Stone hit on Tyler Bozak. that was not even touched. Now, kudos to the NHL for at least doing something, but they needed to do more. The fact is, you can't have a goon as the head of player safety. I'm sorry. You're just not going to have the same kind of, response, because they like that style of hockey. They like the rough style. They played the rough style. So I think the NHL, and I wanted your thoughts on this too. I think the NHL dropped the ball in they named the wrong guy as the head of player safety.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree, Joe, because just because you're a tough guy and you're a fighter, it does not mean you can not. It doesn't mean you can't have the opportunity to step in and understand where aggression and types of aggression can benefit a style of hockey. Like, just because George Parros drops the gloves, I don't think he was actually suspended at any time in his career for being a goon. I don't think he dropped the mitts or defamed a player, disgusted another player, as we saw Tom Wilson do yesterday. I don't think he did that ever as a player. I don't think Stefan Quintal before him did the same either. So I think when you consider the fact that there is a style of tough hockey and aggressive hockey versus a style of hockey similar to what you see Tom Wilson play, those are two different apples, two different trees. I don't think you compare one with the other. Now, I'm sure George Parros, has a group of, representing or helping him come to a decision. It's not a one-man wrecking crew that lays down the guillotine and says, this person gets 4 games, this person gets 8 games. There is a history book, and there is reprimands that have occurred in previous years, and why they are not associating or making decisions based on history is beyond me. I mean, Sean Avery, classic example, the Avery rule, the indefinite suspension that he faced over a decade ago with Dallas. Here is a player that wasn't able to return to hockey because of things he did on and off the ice. Ty Domi, Bob Probert, Dave Semenko. I could name 4 or 5 other tough guys. Ryan Reeves is the current tough guy in the NHL. We would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
An enforcer, a talented player, not to the talent to which Tom Wilson is for scoring goals. Pretty sure Wilson has better points and whatnot. But when you consider the style of play between Ryan Reeves and Tom Wilson, again, 2 different apples, 2 different trees. 2 have, been very close and have been on Stanley Cup finals and winning teams, but they understand their role and how to play it. The one big difference is Ryan Reeves plays his role within the rules and the construct of the National Hockey League. Tom Wilson gets loose. Tom Wilson is now shown that he's allowed to get away with things. And the problem with this now, Joe, is we don't know what's going to happen the next time he goes on the ice. That's always been the same scenario, the same issue, every single time you see a repeat offender going on the ice. Getting away with things like this with a mere slap on the wrist. It is uncalled for. It is undervalued. And I think possibly Mr. Daly might need to step in here, give George a little slap on the wrist, and maybe tell him to go find another profession perhaps.
Yeah.
Because and that is where the accountability of the National Hockey League has let down the other 30 teams in the NHL. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk has had Winnipeg Jets number for the last 2 seasons. Mark Scheifele last year in the playoffs goes down with an Achilles injury. You could clearly see how Tkachuk's skate raises and does a certain move to injure the player. Whether he says he does it on purpose, he's going to deny it, of course. He also did the same thing to Blake Wheeler this year with a high hit, giving him a concussion. And since then, my Jets have not been the same team since. Yeah. The same thing happened with, what's his name, Alex Galchenyuk with Toronto. Adam Lowry out with a concussion. And he just returned for his first game. And I'm just picking on the Jets. We mentioned Tyler Bozak at the beginning of the year with Mark Stone. We've seen high hits. We've seen players unsafe in an 85 by 200 foot rink that should be safe and should be allowed to play the game at the speed and the intensity that they want without worrying about players like Tom Wilson running around on the ice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The fact is, you need to make an example out of Tom Wilson, and so far the NHL's failed at that. I don't understand why. So
They've made a terrific example of him. They've made a terrific example of the fact that you can get away with things and you can go and play the next game.
What I mean by that, it needs to be, you know what I mean by making
I know exactly. What I'm doing
Yeah.
is I'm proving a point. And the point exactly is you've got thousands of other players. I mean, just because it happened to Panarin and, Pavel, I mean, Panarin is considered one of the top 10 scorers in the league. You've now taken him out of the last several games for the Rangers. Tom Wilson is going to the playoffs. And conduct like that should be detrimental to his team.
Yeah.
He has not learned his lesson because he's continued to do it. I can't remember how many games he's suspended. I think the largest game suspension he's faced is 5 or 6 games, I believe, maybe 8 in total. But this is the 6th infraction in his career.
Yeah. He needs to have more than a slap on the wrist, and that was a slap on the wrist. Now, the New York Rangers have come out with a statement and basically not condemning what he did, and having to put, Artemi Panarin on the shelf for the rest of the year. I mean, granted, it's 6-7 games, whatever. But still, the fact is, you're going to miss those 6 or 7 games if you're Artemi Panarin. We talk about superstars in the league that people need to see. Artemi Panarin is right up there. So, again, like you said, it's bad for the league, and it's bad for the league for that reason alone. You can't have that happen. You can't have one of your stars. That'd be like Mike Trout getting injured. That'd be like when Fernando Tatis got injured. It's bad for sports.
No, what it is now is it's me telling me who's next on my team, who's next team I play. Oh, I play the Capitals next. I'm going to make a phone call to the AHL, and I'm going to go find the guy that's got 250 PIMs. He's got mitts like bear paws, and he's going to line up against Tom Wilson. And he's going to take Tom Wilson's jockstrap, take it off his body, wrap it around his neck, and then serve him up, spoon feed him like a 4-year-old kid. And you know what? That's not the look that the NHL wants. It shouldn't have to come to that.
It shouldn't have to, but I saw that. And if I were the Rangers, is that the way I'd want to handle it, though? I mean, I get
What other way are you going to do it? You have no enforcers on your roster. You have 0 enforcers on your roster. Jacob Trouba is not your enforcer on the roster. You traded away Brandon Lemieux, who doesn't even match up to the same size. The bottom line is, it's disgusting. And the Washington Capitals organization, sure, they get a little bit of, grass stains on the knees because of it, but they're going to the playoffs. They're showing how tough they are. You can't mess with them. And you know what? It's someone else is going to get injured in the wrong way. And the problem is a retaliation injury because of this, whether it be on Tom Wilson or because of Tom Wilson, remains to be seen. I could think of, if you name the 4 other teams that make the playoffs in their division, I will name you 5 players that will go after him if need be when the cameras aren't on him.
I'd love to see, I'd love to see get on him, Brad Marchand.
I don't know why you were thinking that same name, but the bottom line is Brad Marchand has a whole lot more to offer the Boston Bruins than inflicting some sort of whatever on Tom Wilson. If he tries to kiss Tom Wilson or lick his cheek like he did in Toronto, Marchand will get suspended and given bigger fines for that, as opposed to Tom Wilson jumping Artemi Panarin like we did last night. That is why we have a huge issue.
Yeah, we do. And we shall see how it is handled going forward. So before we go to break here, we got a couple score updates. You have the Carolina Hurricanes taking down the Chicago Blackhawks 6-3. You have the Pittsburgh Penguins beating the Philadelphia Flyers 7-3. Wow, just wow, how the mighty have fallen in Philadelphia. Vancouver and Edmonton going on right now. That is 1-0 Vancouver with a little less than 9 minutes left in the first period. And we will go to break. And right after the break, there are a few trade possibilities for Aaron Rodgers. We'll talk about those next here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Theo, this Aaron Rodgers situation is getting beefier by the day. There are trade possibilities for Aaron Rodgers, at least what ESPN thinks or whatever. I'm going to name some of these off one by one, and I want your thoughts on all of these. First, let's go to number one in the Denver Broncos. So the Broncos would get Aaron Rodgers and Eric Stokes for quarterback Patrick Surtain, wide receiver Tim Patrick, quarterback Drew Lock, a first-round draft pick in 22, and a first-round draft pick in 23. Go ahead on that one.
Whatever. I mean, you know how I am with drafting potential. Secondly, Drew Lock is a whatever. Then you're leaving with Lock and Jordan Love running the helm in Green Bay. I'd have to check the depth chart in Denver to see what kind of weapons are left. I know Melvin Gordon would still be there because he's not part of that trade. Their offensive line would be a little bit weaker than what Green Bay has. I think it'd be very wise for. I think it would be a wise move for Green Bay because they're getting a lot back. Sure, but that's. I mean, John Elway has done better. He's also keeping Von Miller, right? Von Miller's not part of that trade either.
Right.
So, I mean, that's keeping a pretty decent part of your defensive center, defensive nucleus together because he really can captain that defense to play well.
Well, the reason why I don't know if I like that deal so much is why would you draft a player just to trade him? And I'm talking about both sides on this one.
Well, I mean, I've said it before, Joe. I mean, you talk about draft picks. You're drafting on college prowess and then NFL potential. We talked about yesterday's show about the three quarterbacks that went 1, 2, 3, and I only think one of the three is actually, worthy of being picked in the top three. So in terms of draft potential, you can only go so far. We've seen great picks in the second and third rounds. We've seen absolute duds picked first overall. So I mean, you're basing it all on potential. Now, 37 years old, Aaron Rodgers really does not want to play in Green Bay for whatever reason, and he wants to play elsewhere. So the unfortunate thing is there's no trade clause in Aaron Rodgers, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, the Green Bay Packers control what they want to do with him. So whatever the highest bid is for him, and like I said last night, that bid is only going to get smaller and smaller as these days go on. I do want to comment, however, on my boy Terry Bradshaw for making the comments he made this morning in New York, calling out Aaron Rodgers as being a weak player and worrying about the first-round pick Jordan Love that they took last year. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is really worried about the fact that Jordan Love is going to be a successor. I think Aaron Rodgers is really upset with GM Mike Murphy and their organization for picking a successor in a draft that did not have quality quarterbacks compared to this year, and instead trying to get him an asset with a 28th or 25th pick that they had last year. Like, why wouldn't you, if I don't remember the board last year, but I don't think there were a lot of wide receivers taken in the first round. I don't think there was a lot of my apologies. There were more offensive linemen picked in last year's draft in the first round compared to this year's draft. So why aren't you looking to help your star quarterback instead of keeping him on an island. Like, he has done great jobs with Tanyans. He has done great jobs with Rodgers, the tight end. Stancliffe, and obviously what he's done with Jordy Nelson prior years. Devontae Adams. I mean, these are players that he has brought that have been here, and he's brought them to here. He's only elevated their games. Why aren't the Green Bay Packers helping Aaron Rodgers out?
Yeah.
Is it just because they're doing the same thing as they did with Brett Favre and realizing they've got a golden child here? Let's milk him for all he's worth, and then let's get rid of him.
If I'm Green Bay, though, I wouldn't want to piss off your franchise quarterback like you did with Brett Favre. I don't think Aaron Rodgers, if he does leave there and this divorce does end ugly, I don't think he comes back there for a Ring of Honor ceremony like Green Bay does.
Let's worry about next week, Joe.
Yeah, but
who gives a shit about the Ring of Honor?
This is starting to look like that. This is starting to look like that divorce that was the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre. But how is Aaron Rodgers going to take this? Brett Favre at least had a heart to him. You know what? I had a lot of great years here, and he was the better man and getting and coming back. Will Aaron Rodgers do that? I don't know, but I know that's looking too far into the future. But that's the way I think, man. I know it's kind of cynical to think that way, but I'm seeing the same scenario happening over and over again, man.
In the years that we've seen in the last decade of players gathering more popularity amongst social media, gathering more popularity amongst teammates and fellow teammates on other teams, when you see them gathering all of this decision-making opportunity, yet in Green Bay you have all of these important decisions to be made, why wouldn't you include Aaron Rodgers? Here is a guy that has gone, it took him 2.5 years to break into the NFL. He was supposed to be a number 1 pick side by side Alex Smith in that draft. He slips all the way into Green Bay's hands. Could not have been a better scenario on paper for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, think about that. Here you have at the time Brett Favre, who's somewhat declining, but he's still an extremely great quarterback. Learning from him, being the sponge, soaking everything in. And if you wanted to make the same position available for Aaron Rodgers, why not include him in this decision-making?
Exactly.
Why not make him part of the solution, not part of the problem?
Yeah. I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers, yeah, there have been rumors about him not being the best teammate, whatever, but you're not exactly making the guy happy either. He's had one legit weapon, I should say. Couple potential ones, I get it. And then Rubber Tonyan, who is 2 weapons and a lot of iffies. But you don't have another for sure weapon. So it'll be interesting to see what this offseason holds. I still think it's going to get even more hairy. How about this number 2 scenario, Theo? You got the Washington football team. Washington would get Aaron Rodgers for quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. Defensive tackle Matt Ioannidis. 2 first-round draft picks in 2022 and 2023, and 2 second-round draft picks in 2022 and 23. Your thoughts on that?
That defense is solid, and the defensive-minded HC and Ron Rivera is certainly doing great things on the defensive side. They did not make a trade up this draft for a quarterback. And I really thought that they would have gone after Ohio State's Justin Fields. I really thought having him and Chase Young on both sides of the field, both sides of the offense and defense, would have made a little bit of sense. But there was never no rumblings about that. I'm not sure of how many draft picks Washington has in the upcoming 2 drafts. That's giving up a lot of stable for a player for the next 2 years. Is it worth it? Ultimately, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a warrior style of quarterback. He's played the most games with the most different teams, and he's not going to go to the Hall unless he gets an all-pro decision. So, I mean, as much as I mean, again, it's a costly scenario for the Washington football team, but for a team that wants to make some massive waves, right now, this would be it.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Here, I'm going to move on to number 3. You have a 3-team trade here with the Miami Dolphins, Green Bay Packers, and Pittsburgh Steelers. The Packers would get the first-round pick via San Francisco in 2022. First-round pick better of Miami and San Francisco, and that's in 2023. Fifth-round pick from Miami in 2023, and a first-round pick from Pittsburgh in 2022. Pittsburgh would get Tua Tagovailoa, and Dolphins would get Aaron Rodgers and a fourth-round pick from the Packers in 2023.
Well, the state of Florida, no sales tax would be nice for Aaron Rodgers. Warmer weather would be nice for Aaron Rodgers. He has a lot of weapons in Miami that he doesn't have here in Green Bay. And I think Pittsburgh will be the loser of that whole deal, to be honest with you.
I know me.
Because Tua does not fit in anywhere, shape, or form. The only thing that fits in with Tua is the fact that they got Najee Harris in the running back scenario. I just see a whole shuffling of potential. The only true thing that's going to happen is the Miami Dolphins could challenge the Buffalo Bills to win the division. That's the only thing I could see if that trade's made.
All right, and number 4. You have the New York Giants. The Packers would get Darius Slayton, a first-round pick in 2022, first-round pick from Chicago in 2022, and a first-round conditional draft pick in 2023 for Aaron Rodgers.
That seems the least amount of give up because you're still keeping Saquon Barkley, who hopefully stays healthy all year.
Okay.
That's all I got to say.
That's all you got to say on that. That trade seems interesting. I mean, what would you do with Daniel Jones? That's another issue. I mean, they seem committed to Daniel Jones, but, these are just, trades floated out by the media. So I don't know. I just thought it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts on those trades would be because, a couple of those seemed interesting. Not saying they're going to happen, but, when you're starting to see trade proposals or media trade proposals, that's telling me we're getting closer and closer to Rodgers being out.
And like I said before, the longer this goes on, the more evidence that he stays in Green Bay this year, or the asking price for Aaron Rodgers goes down.
Exactly. So we're going to leave it there. We will come back right here on Crunch Time, talk about the NBA and a certain player in the NBA. Is he top 10 worthy in NBA history? We'll talk about that and a little bit more right here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I am Joe alongside Theo. Theo, there's one question I got to ask you. Is Steph Curry, knowing he had another 40-point game yesterday, is he in your top 10 all time?
No.
Is it by a lot, though?
Well, I'm going to say that his career is not over.
No.
And that's why I'm saying no. Because the other thing is, I'm going to date myself because I come from a generation that saw tougher basketball players. I saw basketball players that weren't reinventing the game. But I see Steph Curry entering the league and how truly amazing he is as an outside shooter. And I don't want to call him one-dimensional, but if you take his outside shot game away, that's really I'll go on the olive tree limb here. That is the only part of his game that makes him considered to be a top 10 worthy player. If you told me that Steph Curry could go in and say, listen, Steph, you know what? Out of the 80-game season or 72-game season, do you think you can prove yourself as being a dasher to the hoop? Someone who is an assist guy, someone who can dunk, someone who can play another dimension of the game as good as that next best player, then I'll consider it. I mean, the same goes true to what Michael Westbrook has done this year as well. I mean, considering what you've done for me now, what are you doing for me lately? Steph Curry will be considered to be one of the best shooters of all time. Yes, I'll give him that. He's got the hardware to prove it, the points per game to prove it, the average to prove it. Michael Westbrook has now averaged a triple-double in 4 consecutive years, something that has never been done or will be done probably in the NBA ever again. Only because the game has changed in a certain way to allow for individual prowess to escalate and flourish. But the last time I checked, I still measure players in team efficiency, team composures, and last time I look at the hardware on the hand. And Michael Westbrook has 0. He has one MVP in 2016, 2017.
Well, and I think Russell Westbrook was robbed of at least one more MVP. If you average a triple-double every year, you're robbed of an MVP at least 1 year.
But go ahead.
Can you name me a player? If a player averages a triple-double, no matter what team they're on, how does that not make them MVP worthy? Because he's not on a good team? That's what I don't understand about sports in general.
I'll break it down very simply in 20 seconds, Joey. Put the timer on me. You ready? You got the timer? A triple-double player in the NBA is not considered an MVP player unless he's not helping the rest of his team win every single night. Michael Westbrook has shown that he cannot do that. My 20 seconds are up.
Okay.
So last year he's in with Houston, with James Harden, with Mike D'Antoni as the coach, a very offensive-minded coach. Run and gun, fire at will, do what you need to do, share the rock as much as you can with James Harden. With both of those players on the court, they average between 65 and 80 points a game. Yet they still could not get past the first round of the playoffs. Number 2, they had James Harden, KD, Michael Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka on the OKC Thunder. Even though they weren't in their prime, 4 tremendous players, probably the creation of a non-super team indirectly.
Well, and here's the thing, and I'll take this a step further. If that team stays together, it's a dynasty.
Absolutely. So there you look at the scenario and say, okay, who broke first? Who didn't buy into a team chemistry? But also it tells you how much lack of team chemistry those 4 players had. The only 2 that are together now are KD and James, and they haven't even played a dozen games together this season yet because of injury or rest management or whatever you want to call it. Granted, the Washington Wizards got the best of that deal trading for Michael Westbrook for James Wall, because James Wall has been not talked about at all this season with the Rockets. Bottom line is Beal and Westbrook still do not have the chemistry, albeit the last night when he scored only 14 points, dimed out 21 and rebounded 24 boards. That is when the Washington Wizards played well. So I would rather take a Michael Westbrook who individually doesn't score as much, but allows his team to get better. If he can sink that in his brain for the next 6 or 7 games before they go into playoffs, they win a majority of them, they get in that 1-game play-in, maybe they could cause a stir. But I cannot see the Washington Wizards winning a 7-game series because they do not have the history of team chemistry to win a majority of a 7-game series.
When I talked to you about that play-in tournament last night, And the Washington Wizards, that one of the matchups, if it were to end last night, would have been the Washington Wizards against the Indiana Pacers. No one would want to watch that game. Really? I mean, can
But
you really tell?
It's not that game. It's the precursor to who will fight the first or second seed.
Well, yeah, exactly. And no, I just don't like. I want to get back into the NBA in terms of, watching it all the time. I watch a little bit here and there, but I want to get back to watching it all the time. When I see a David versus Goliath in today's NBA, it's almost a guarantee it's going to be a sweep. I don't like that NBA. You know what I mean? I don't like
Sure.
things like that.
I totally see that as being an issue because in the recent, if you looked at the late 90s, 2000s, like the game a decade ago, when you saw 1 versus 8, yeah, you would see a 3-game sweep, a 4-game sweep. Absolutely. That 8 seed would not have a single chance of winning a single game. But the parity of both divisions, the East and the West, is almost flip-flopped to where you see the top 3 teams in the East potentially losing to the bottom 3 teams of the 6, 7, 8 spot 2 games. I mean, the Miami Heat, who went all the way to the conference finals last year, the NBA finals, are sitting in the 6th spot. You look at the West Division, where the Los Angeles Lakers are now sitting in a 5th spot. And there's a huge discrepancy between 4th and 5th. I think 4th is Clippers, where they're only 4 games back, and the Lakers, I think, are 10 games back. So there's a 6-game margin. So the top 4 teams in the West aren't going to get touched, but Team 5 through Team 10 can certainly move around because there's only 3.5 games separating those 5 teams. So really what's going to happen is that parity, that matchup of the bottom 4 teams in both divisions is going to wreak havoc on the top 4 teams of their respective division. Because you aren't going to see that. Sure, you're going to see that favor over a 72-game regular season, but the game changes, as we both know, come playoff time. Giannis was knocked out of the first round last year. He was a 2-time NBA MVP in the last 2 years. Potentially could be a 3-time NBA MVP right now. But the bottom line is, one player cannot win you a playoff series in this type of game this year.
So you're saying any team that LeBron's on is not going to win. Just the one player, like you said. Because every time LeBron plays on a team, his teams aren't usually that great, but somehow they make the playoffs because LeBron's Superman.
Well, okay, so if you talked about LeBron at 28 versus LeBron at what, he's 33 or 35 now?
Yeah, right.
It's a different LeBron. And LeBron knows that. That's why he grabbed AD last year and said, I need a running mate. If you look at the Los Angeles Lakers, they've never been built like that for a LeBron team, where they have 6 or 7 bigs on their squad that can actually play decent defense, including AD. That's the different construct dynamic of the Lakers this year. Dame Lillard is screaming for Kevin Love to come join the Portland Trailblazers. Because if they added that piece to the puzzle in Portland, that changes their dynamic tremendously. But look at what's happening at the top of the West. You've got the Utah Jazz, and you've got a Jamal Murray-less Denver Nuggets squad who just lost to the Lakers last night. But those 2 teams are 1-3 respectively. The Clippers are quiet, and they're cool with being quiet because they know that they got to make an absolute boom or bust in the playoffs. I see Kawhi resting a little bit once they realize they've clinched the 4th spot. Then they're going to move forward. Paul George has got to get out of that funk in LA. He has to become playoff George, not Paul George, like he promised. Mm-hmm. He's got to show up differently too. And I said last night, as much as I love watching the New York Knicks, they won another one last night. And the bottom line is they're not playoff potential, but they're playing like a playoff team. And they could surprise some teams as well. Will they? I don't think so. They think they're still too young. But at least they're going to make the playoffs and have a decent winning. They're going to have an over 500 record for the first time in 13 years. That's pretty awesome.
That's something to build on. That's something that, another team I wanted to bring up is, and one of my buddies that I went to broadcast school with, he said this a couple weeks back. Are the Utah Jazz even a threat? Because this could be, a team that is great in regular season, but if they have any kind of once they see some competition in the playoffs, that could be it. What are the Utah Jazz?
The Utah Jazz are an enigma. And I call them the enigma because they've got a couple of very good players. Rudy Gobert is fantastic. I mean, defensive player of the year, truly plays defensive ball, owns the inside of that paint. It is deceptive and unreal what he does without the ball. His body position is one better than nobody else. Do I see them going far? Yeah, because the proof is in the pudding this year. They have been so good as a team. They aren't relying on just one player. At the same time, you look at how CP3 has resurged in Phoenix. Another interesting dynamic there, where Jamal Murray is missing for the Denver Nuggets. CP3 has shown up and really brought that team to the next level. I like Utah. I like Phoenix. I don't think them playing all great during the regular season is going to hinder them in how well they play in the playoffs. I really think they're going to play well. I see them winning a majority of a 7-game series, both of them.
Question is, can they do that for the long haul? I'd like to see a different champion. So, and someone that's not LeBron for a change. I'm a LeBron fan, but yes, I'm tired of seeing it. So,
well, the thing is, LeBron has to rely, because he's not playing for the rest of this week. He's taking some time off to take care of that ankle because it's not healed properly.
Right.
He's going to rely on the rest of his team, including AD, to do what they got to do to stay out of that 7th spot.
Hey, that's a good move, though. I commend LeBron James for that. I know a lot of people.
Would you rather have an 80% LeBron or 100% LeBron?
100% LeBron. Of
course.
Period.
So their team should be strong enough to win these next 6 or 7 games to make sure they don't fall below 7.
Yeah. So it's how many games are left in the NBA season, roughly?
Couldn't tell you. I think 6 to 8 games. I think per team.
Okay. So
getting down to their play-in series starts in 2 weeks, I think.
Getting down to the nitty-gritty, that will be fun to watch. The NBA playoffs are always fun to watch. So we'll see what happens going forward, how this play-in tournament's going to play out and everything else. But let's get to the NBA scoreboard here. You got the aforementioned Phoenix Suns beating the Cleveland Cavaliers 134-118. Charlotte Hornets take down the Detroit Pistons 102-99. You have the Milwaukee Bucks taking down the Brooklyn Nets 124-118. The New Orleans Pelicans taking down the Golden State Warriors 108-103. And that's going to be another storyline. What Zion Williamson are we going to see in the playoffs? That's going to be fun to watch there. Watching him alone is the price of admission. So the Dallas Mavericks take down the Miami Heat 127-113, and the Sacramento Kings take down the Oklahoma City Thunder 103-99. One more game going on right now. Your Toronto Raptors are beating the Los Angeles Clippers with about 6 minutes to go in the second quarter, 41-39. So safe to say, you could see some playoff matchups in tonight's games alone. So I'm excited to see how Zion performs in the playoffs. So what are some of the guys, before we get out of here, what are some of the guys you're looking forward to? Besides,
I really want to see the 76ers play playoff ball. As much as I don't follow Philadelphia, I really liked their battles with Toronto over the last couple of years. I really felt they got the raw end of that stick when they faced Toronto in the playoffs. Now that Toronto's not there, I really want to see them move forward. I'm going to be curious to see how well New York plays in their first playoff round. I really think that'll be a fun series to watch whoever they play. And in terms of these one-in games, I want to see the desperation in those 2 games, because that is going to provide that added excitement to this playoffs. Whether you're a part of them or not, I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not they can play that one extra game to get in, or if they're just going to bow out and say that's it.
Yeah, so again, this is going to be a fun last 6 games or so to get your appetite wet for playoff basketball. That's going to be so much fun. For Theo, I'm Joe. Thank you guys for watching tonight. Good show. Until tomorrow, be good to one another. Do the right things. See you tomorrow.